Yep.
Unless I'm still.
Yep. All right, item agenda number 5, HPC application 23-003. Discussion and potential action on a request for a determination of an existing structure's status as a contributing resource or a general resource for a building located at 120 West Cleveland Avenue. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, this is at 120 West Cleveland Avenue, which currently has Katie's Diner. After going over the information in that, I was a little, I guess, confused or uncertain. So I definitely didn't want to make the call myself. I got information from the museum. Both Valerie and Nathan were very helpful, and they're always helpful. And it's one of those things where I don't think a lot of people understand the resource we have in that in the community. But I just felt it was appropriate, given all the different information, to bring it to the HPC Commission to have the overall discussion, and essentially this body determine whether it's a contributing resource or a general resource. I won't go into a lot of the information I provided because I think a lot of that will come up and you guys got to read it in that. But just to, if you want to say, make it clear on why it matters, per our ordinance, if it's a contributing resource, a item cannot be heard from 60 days of application on any determination of demolition or anything like that. They also have to prove an economic hardship or meet some other criteria in there for basically, I forget what it's called, but for the different circumstances in that. And so that would have to come down the road. If it's determined that it's a general resource, then per our ordinance, we could move forward and actually hear the item for demolition as well as building a new structure on that particular property. In the event, depending on how it went, I did put it on the agenda as the next item. If it is determined to be a contributing resource, we will not hear item number 3 or that portion of the agenda tonight. But again, if it is, then we can go into some of those conversations in that. So with that, I'll give it back to the commission. If you have any questions of me in that, and again, thankfully, we have a couple people from the museum that probably are going to be able to answer a lot of it better than I.
Okay. Discussion.
Where to begin?
So I think we should.
Let's hear from our
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in both feet
Yeah.
here. This one has been confusing to us as well, because when you look at one sheet of paper, it says that 123 is a contributing building, okay, which obviously isn't Katie's. But the final contributing, non-contributing sheet says Damon Lumber Company, but it doesn't give an address. So is that still 123, or is that everything combined? The other question that had kind of raised in my head, Katie's itself, was it essentially halved at some point, the building?
I was going to say, if you guys could go up, yeah, to answer any questions. Thank you.
And what was the last thing you said, Nathan?
I was wondering if the building,
Had to.
been a long time since I was that young in Damon Lumber Company. But that building was quite a bit longer at one point than
And then they sliced it in half.
yeah,
right?
almost like they sliced it. And I don't know if maybe you can tell that from,
Thomas Small with SA Studio, we're the architects for Katie's Diner. We've been known as Small Architects for 23 years, so SA Studio is our new name, but we've been around a while. As far as we can tell, the only remaining structure that we know of that may have some historic contributions to the neighborhood would be the front part of what's Katie's Diner now.
right.
The back 1/3 of the building was an addition that was made at some point in time for the kitchen specifically.
Okay.
And so it really covers the north part of the building, the original, what we would call the original building. What existed in place of the kitchen and further to the north, we cannot find any record of that specifically. The best thing that we have found available to us in our research has been 1914, I believe, Sanborn map, which I included in the package. And that shows that the, let's see, yeah, 1914, shows that the lots, let's see, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, and 13, those three deeded lots were covered by the lumberyard. The Sanborn map does not indicate a individual structure on the site that's in question here. It does show by dashed lines, there were two, I would call dedicated structures at the far southwest corner of the property that appear to be maybe a sales building and that sort of thing. But the rest of it seems to be completely designated as a lumber company, which again, we don't have proof of this opinion, but in our opinion, that would indicate that some, if not all, of that part of the property was covered by various sheds, lean-tos, other things to protect the property that they had in stock there. As to this particular building and what it was, at least at this point in time, we can't find anything that definitively says this is what it was, and it was, and whether or not it in fact was there at that time, being in 1914. And we, again, I've got I have a lot of empathy for what you all do. I was on the Oklahoma City Preservation Commission for about 7 years, so I understand your dedication and appreciate it. We would consider being a lumber business at that time, we would consider that to be what we would call to be the time of significance, the historic significance of that particular site. And especially since the museum kind of shows it as being potentially anything on that site potentially might be a contributing resource, but it relates to the fact that it was a lumber business. And so our opinion of that is that the historic significance of the site would be tied to anything tied to the lumber business at that time, which would have been turn of the century to the latest information we have is around 1914.
And just for the record, just so, you know, because I think that's an important part is the period of influence. For our ordinance and ours, you know, the period of influence for our district is considered 1889 to 1910. Yeah.
But just to reiterate, the last thing you were saying was that in 1914, they would usually just consider everything that's on the whole property as one entity. Is that what you
Yeah, again, Sanborn were fire maps,
Uh-huh.
and so what they tended to show was risk, because it had to do with insurance. And so where they may not have designated every single individual structure that may have been on that site, if they were all somewhat common in their use and purpose, for example, one-story wood frame sheds or lumber individual little buildings, they wouldn't have shown every single one of those on the site. They would just cover it all the same. And if it had a specific use, as a sales shed or something like that, they likely would have showed that as a separate use often.
Okay.
Not always the case, but it's pretty consistent.
Sure.
They do designate between, for example, masonry versus wood construction, things like that. There's an actual key to Sanborn maps that you can find online that's very helpful in that.
Does anybody else have anything? Right, well, I have another question for him if you guys want to say something.
Just for information, you know, you said 123 building, or I think.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, 123 would not be on that side of the street, it would be 124. Because on the north side of the street, they're even numbers. So I don't know where the 123 came from. And then that building was the original lumberyard from the 1910 period. The other buildings in the 50s and 60s, there were lumber sheds running north and south along both of those lanes that run through there. So you had a two-sided lumber shed behind what is now Katie's Diner that ran north, and you had a one-sided lumber shed on the west side that opened to the east. And the office was on the corner, later moved to the to the building, where Katie's is now. And of course, later was other things after that, but
That
I
makes
think,
perfect sense.
right,
Yeah.
so, and those were all frame buildings, lumber shed with roofs and so on, which typical, you know, for that time period. So my thinking is it may be a stretch for it to be a contributing resource, that building.
Well, my
Y'all's
concern,
opinion.
well, my concern is that it is listed on one list as a contributing structure. And once it's torn down, it can't be rebuilt like exactly as it was. And Dan, I recommended to you that you contact SHPO.
Yeah, and I
State
couldn't
Historic-
get a hold of them with anything, so,
But I think that we need to wait to see what their opinion on all this is before
We can do
anything
that.
is demolished.
yeah,
That
that's
would
an
be my
option.
opinion.
Yeah, that's an option. I will be meeting with them on Wednesday, so, on another thing, so at the very least, I was gonna talk to them then.
Okay.
Would it be your opinion then that when it says the block 44 with just the address, that they were just putting a general address? Because when you look at block 44, it says Guthrie Lumber Co. over it. That's kind of what Nathan was saying earlier, was that, right? That-
Yeah, and it is
Oh,
124
definitely so.
on the list, so
Absolutely.
I apologize.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just put the,
Yeah, they wouldn't list separate addresses for each lot.
For each
It would
lot,
be all
right.
Together, right.
just the, yeah. And then, because then when you look at the other page that has the handwriting written in, sorry, I'm trying to get through. Yeah, because there it says lot 13, 1908, and then 14 to 16 NC, which is non-contributing, correct? Isn't that what that means?
Yes.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to assume, but I imagine that's what that means. And then when you go look, 14 and 15 is the Katie's Diner. But, I mean, I'm just throwing out what I'm seeing on here. But if Valerie's suggesting, no, we at least hear from SHPO, though, right, before.
That would be what I would do.
What would they do potentially?
The same thing, they could, try to find any information they have, but even they themselves could say, we consider it a contributing resource or general resource, or based on, their, if you want to say research record, or whatever, the information they have.
Yeah, the other thing that SHPO would speak on their behalf somewhat, but the other thing they would consider is if what is remained has adequate historic fabric remaining. In other words, is it in any way representative of what it was at the time, or has it been changed so much over time that it's lost its historic fabric?
Yeah, correct. And that's a good point, because there are buildings that at one time were considered contributing resources and over time have lost that status. One of the ones I always use is like where the Vapor Maven or the vape shop over on the corner there. At one time, that was a contributing resource, but because it's been changed substantially from its original, it no longer is in that. So, yeah, that's a possibility too, is that they would look at it in that vein.
One of the examples of, sort of an example of what we're talking about in Edmond, Oklahoma, where our office is located in downtown Edmond. Sanders Camera Shop was there for years, in the 45 to around 90, something like that. And it was a business that was located on 2nd Street near Boulevard. And it was obviously an old house that had been there for years and years. The Edmond Historic Preservation Group had adequate evidence that they believed it was the original 1889 schoolhouse from when the land grant happened. SHPO did not believe it. They felt that, no, you're mistaken, this couldn't be. And so the HP group hired our office to do a historic research on it. And then also, we hired a contractor to actually do some very careful demolition in certain areas to try to make a determination. What we found is that when we took some modern-day sheetrock off some of the walls on the inside of the building, we found some old siding that had been painted black and actually still had the blackboard from the school on the inside, which is pretty neat. But that adequately proved to SHPO that it was in fact the original schoolhouse. However, it wasn't, SHPO was not willing to make a designation that it was a contributing resource because it had been changed so much over the years. It had modified, had the second story put onto it, and all kinds of things. So what they allowed us to do is actually do effectively a reconstruction of the original schoolhouse, because we did have quite a bit in terms of historic photographs and things like that.
Could you move from?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
You bet. And so what it's kind of what we were talking about, but in reverse. SHPO was convinced it was not the historic structure. We basically proved that it was, but it was not still considered a contributing resource because it lost so much of its historic fabric.
Is this on Second?
Yes,
Second Boulevard? Is that right?
just west of Boulevard, right.
Yeah, the
right.
white building on the
Mhm.
south side of the street.
Yeah. Yeah, it's being fully restored, and the,
But was it decided to do that even after SHPO decided that it wasn't a contributing resource?
yes, it was, for a number of reasons. One, the fact that it originally was the Edmund Schoolhouse was very important to the
Right.
historic group. But it also enabled them to recreate, from the evidence that we had available, which was pretty significant, a reconstruction of the Edmund Schoolhouse. And then they had a lot of furnishings
Was
that
that
were able to.
information that SHPO provided?
No, that's stuff that we dug up through OHS, Oklahoma Historical Society, and other resources that we had available to us at the time. Yeah, this would have been back in 2004, 2006, around that time period, when that project was completed.
I mean,
Interesting.
of course, it just makes you wonder, if the building was a contributing resource, the siding's different, the windows are different, the walls are different. I mean, maybe the floor is original.
We did find the original floors underneath existing flooring, so, and we had to do a lot of patchwork to bring it back, but the new
But
flooring.
you're talking
actually-
about the school now, right?
Yes, yes.
I'm talking about Katie.
Oh, I'm sorry. That, we have not dug into it, so we don't know the answer to that, right, on how much it actually still exists. Obviously, the framing, for the most part, is still there, kind of behind the finishes.
Right.
But in terms of the finishes themselves, I mean, I can't give you an exact answer, but I can't imagine much in the way of finishes remains from the original, especially since it was a lumber shed in its infancy, and not a diner.
But we're sort of in a position now to contact SHPO.
Yeah,
And go through that process.
In my opinion, that's a very good way to approach it, because what they will basically render an opinion and write a letter to that effect. Right.
So I guess our answer is hurry up and wait. Sorry.
Well, and the other thing I was going to offer is technically, we would like to see demolition happen if it's not a contributing resource, because obviously the front of the building would face south, and you wouldn't see the front of the building, the new building, once the existing remains. So that's one of the main the reasoning for building a new building behind the existing is because Katie's Diner wants to remain in operation until the new building is constructed and ready to occupy.
And I think that would fall under economic hardship too, if.
Potentially.
If we went down, if you go down that route.
I was gonna ask if you guys were gonna shut down or not, but that just answered my question.
No, their plans is to keep it open. And
So in theory,
build a new one.
we could, again, with permission, we could build the new building without demolishing the old one. That really doesn't do us a whole lot of good, because the old building is right in front of the new one. But if you wanted a discussion about the new design and the appropriateness of it, I'm certainly here to answer any questions about that. If you'd rather table that until you know the answer about demolition, that's entirely your prerogative.
Is there any time sensitive?
Let the owners
Proposals
address
for
that.
this?
We'd like to get going with this project as soon as we get approval.
How long does SHPO usually take?
I don't know. Like I said, I have a meeting with them on another thing on Wednesday, so I'll be contacting beforehand, but even some of the information that you guys have, I'll probably give to them as well. And I'll have a better idea then, I'm not really sure.
With it being outside of the designated National Historic Landmark District, will they still make it a priority, or will they, is it something they still look at?
Oh,
Being
yeah.
outside?
It's still part of the
Yeah.
historic register
Yeah, yeah,
area.
I didn't know.
There's
Yeah.
two different
Yeah.
designations.
yeah, yeah. The reason I kind of mentioned that is we had a survey done in 19 of all the buildings, but it only included the National Historic Landmark District. So had we had a survey done, that might have helped us a little bit for the whole district, but we didn't have money for it, so, yeah. But they'll still be able to, as Valerie said, regardless, because it's on the register, yeah. And I mean, at this point, if you guys obviously want to table it, pending, you know, SHPO's information, we can, you know, do that and then go from there.
That'd be great. Hopefully you can, like you said, when you talk to them this time, you can not necessarily throw it in, but be like, hey, we have this as well.
Well, yeah, and
Get the
hopefully
ball
we could
rolling.
hear something back to have this back on the April meeting.
Yeah,
and
that's,
that-
yeah, that'd be super
yeah,
ideal.
Yeah. Because as I indicated, you know, you can't take action on the other part of it till, you know, well, number one, till we determine, but even if it was a contributing resource till May in that, so, per our ordinance, so.
Well, I appreciate.
Even an April meeting, if we find, is still gonna be more expedient than if we had to wait till obviously the May meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So if we move to, you know, send this to SHPO, do we want to discuss the new design
We can't.
We
at all?
can't.
We can't per the
Cannot.
ordinance, yeah.
Well, there's that.
There you go.
You guys have obviously been given the information and that, so you know what's going on and all that. But yeah, like I said, per the ordinance, it can't be discussed or rendered until we figure out which path we need to go down.
Okay, I make a motion to send it SHPO.
Okay. Motion to table while getting input from
SHPO.
SHPO.
Yeah,
I'll
so we have-
second.
all right, so we have a motion for tabling.
Second,
Go to
Valerie.
SHPO. Okay, second.
All right. Joe Chappell,
Yes.
Nathan Turner,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes,
Darrell Covington,
Yes.
Aaron Rooney,
No.
okay, and Adam Rock.
Yes.
Okay.
I appreciate you
Still
guys.
passes 5-1.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys being here and providing your expertise and your patience with us for doing this. I appreciate it a lot.
I think it's also great that you've got an architect who's been on HP. So he can.
Yes,
These
to do this.
decisions are not easy, but.
yep. And we understand you want to get going as fast as you can. So we'll try to go.
We're supposed to oversee preservation, and when we come across a building that has questions, whether it's, you know, and it's very unfortunate sometimes that people have bought into a historic district.
Yeah. It's a permanent thing, you know, to tear it down, so we're just trying to make sure we, you know what I mean, just make sure that it's certain of what we're doing, so, thank you for bearing with us on that.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Then we don't do number 6 then, right, Dan?
That is correct.
Okay. Staff comments?
The only thing, again, I just want to say, you know, a big thank you to Valerie and Nathan and that, the
Yeah.
museum. They're always very helpful and have a lot of information there in that, so it's always good that we can lean on them for a lot of this, because it is very helpful and appreciated.
That's a lot of research.
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner comments?
I've enjoyed being on the commission,
Oh, yeah, this is Joe's
This is
last
Joe's
meeting.
last
Yep,
um,
I forgot to mention that.
and, you know, knowing me, I'll probably be standing out there sometime.
Oh, and you found your replacement, of course?
No, I have
No,
not.
not yet. We're working on it.
All right.
Are you gonna be out there making comments?
Or bugging you.
Well, you gotta be on the agenda, I'm just saying.
sounds like a story we don't know.
Or criticizing you after the fact.
none of that's allowed.
So what are you gonna do? Take 20 minutes on the first Monday of each month.
But I think how long have I been on, Valerie? You're the only person been on longer than me. How long have you been on?
1.5 terms.
Yeah,
So I just applied to serve another term.
Yeah, because I think the first one was
Well,
only
wait a
like.
minute. You were here when I came aboard, were you not?
No,
No.
It just seems like you've always
Yeah.
I
been
think you're
here.
thinking, probably.
And how long is the term?
the terms are 4 years,
So I've been on here 8 years.
I was gonna
or
say
3
it's
years,
probably
I'm sorry,
more.
3 years.
I was a, oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say. I was
But a
young
partial
man.
term doesn't count, so she had a partial term, and a full term.
I see.
And I think you did the same, Joe. That's why it seems like you've been also forever.
Oh, I did a partial and then 2 terms.
2 terms,
I
right,
think you're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we appreciate it.
But I still care and I appreciate you guys. And it's a thankless job that is often not even appreciated by the people that ask us to serve. And since we are we just make recommendations. We should always go with your heart. You know, so- Gosh, that sounds corny as heck, but anyway. I've enjoyed being on the commission.
We've enjoyed having you, yeah.
And I've hated a lot of it too. I will admit, some of, yeah,
We've had 2 or 3 exciting ones,
yeah.
you know, like some bigger.
But anyway, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Anybody else? Okay, well, we are adjourned.
Perfect.